Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing an in-depth tutorial on the SSL 360 software, but specifically the SSL 12 tab. So if you have an SSL interface and you want to learn how to use all the software and do all the internal routing and all of that, then this video is going to be for you. If you're not familiar with the SSL 12 interface, I did a comparison video against the SSL 2 Plus interface, so I'll have that linked above and you can check it out. Okay, so when you open up SSL 360, it looks sort of like a soundboard or a mixer or that kind of thing. I actually love the user interface on this. It's very clean and feels right at home for someone who's used to a console kind of workflow. To start, go over here on the right and under View, just click Everything to disable it. I'm just going to go one section at a time and talk through what everything does so it doesn't look as overwhelming. So start with this Analogue In. These are your main 4 mic line instrument inputs on the SSL 12. You'll recognize these 3 buttons here are the same ones that are on the physical interface, and you can click them and the interface will light up. You also have in this big space here is your level meter. So I've got a mic here to test it. Check, check, check. And you'll see it's a really nice meter and it starts to turn yellow as you get hotter. Check, check, hey. So that's a really nice visual representation, better than the one on the surface of the interface because that one only goes by tens. This is a much more detailed view of that. Below that, this is kind of your routing and output section. So you have headphone A, headphone B, and then line 3 and 4. So these are the different output options on your interface. So HPA and HPB, those are your headphone outputs. And each little output send has an option for level, mute, and then pan, and then if you enable pan, then you can pan it left and right. If pan is disabled, then the pan is just going to follow the pan of your main channel down here. So if you're recording drums, for instance, and you want to, pan the toms around, pan the overheads, this is where you would do it. If you want to pan it opposite, so say you are on headphone A, right? You're monitoring your drums on headphone A. Your drummer is monitoring on headphone B. Then you might want to reverse the pan in his ears. So then you'll just come here, turn all these pan knobs on, and then you can separately pan the drums there. If you want to mute that source going to the headphone, you can mute it right here. And you also have an individual level knob for that source. So if you want everything at unity, you can just come through and double click and type 0. So then that's gonna have its own separate level send. It's not gonna follow your fader. Below that is your line 3 and 4. So I use this interface a lot on a mobile rig. And when I use it on the mobile rig, I use line 3 and 4 to feed a headphone amp so that the whole band or talent or whoever's there can all monitor at the same time. I set up line 3 and 4 to route for my headphone amp. So same thing, you have a pan and a mute and a level, just like you do on the headphones, but that is what's going out like the hard 3 and 4 jack on the back of the interface. Below that, you have your regular channel. This is what's going to your main output, your 1 and 2 on your interface, essentially, like your monitors, whatever. You have a cut and a solo there. So if you hit solo, you're just gonna hear that one channel. If you hit cut, you're not gonna hear the channel. And then you have a pan knob and a level knob, like you would in any DAW or console. That's like your main section. Next over here is the Talkback. And this is a mic that's built into the surface of the interface to let you talk to talent or whatever. So you don't need to take like a leftover 58 and plug it into your interface to talk to someone across the room. You can use the Talkback. You can either click to talk right here, and then you'll see it's kind of picking me up, or you can use an assignable button on the interface to enable your Talkback. Either way, that's how you set it up. It's important to note that the Talkback does not output to the master, the 1 and 2. Even if you're not using that for your monitors, because that would cause feedback. I tried setting up 1 and 2 as a send to a headphone amp, but the Talkback does not go to those channels. There's no option for it. So that's the only downside there, but you still have all your headphone and line 3-4 routing up there for your Talkback. Additionally, the only other thing to note down here is this little circle. And right now it's set up as 4 mono channels, but if you click the little circle, it'll make those 2 stereo and link them together and hard pan them. So if you are doing like a grand piano or drum overheads or something, you can go ahead and link those in stereo to make it easier to deal with while you're working. And same thing, you can link these to stereo here. That is it for analog inputs. So on digital in, same kind of set of controls, but your digital in is going to be what's coming down the ADAT. So if you're not aware, you can take 8 channels of ADAT, say from like an 8-channel Focusrite, come out and into your SSL 12 interface and actually expand it to have 8 more inputs. That's huge if you're recording bands or drums or anything that needs a large channel count, or you just want to tie in, an additional interface that you already had that supports ADAT, you can do that right there. So other than that, these have the same metering up top, the same headphone and line setup, and everything's the same. It's just from a different area. So if you're using ADAT, turn on your digital in along with your analog in. If you're not using ADAT, just turn off your digital in and you'll have a lot more screen real estate. Playback returns. This is outputs from your DAW. So if you're using Logic or Pro Tools or whatever, your main stereo out is almost always going to go to playback 1 and 2. So I've pulled up a quick session in Logic to show you what that playback return looks like from the other side. So right here, I just have a drummer track and I have a click track. You're not going to hear any audio because of the routing I had to do, but so drums, they are going to stereo output along with click. Those are both going to stereo out. If we pop back over to SSL 12, you'll see all of that coming in playback 1 and 2. So if we go over to click and set the output to something else, you'll see right here we have 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 8. So this corresponds to those playback returns in SSL. So the output 3 and 4, now we're sending click to output 3 and 4, and Logic gives you a new output automatically. So you'll be able to see, so our click just happening on the beats and going to 3 and 4 on the beats. And then if we go to SSL 360, you'll see it right there, same thing. And then unmute the drums, those are going to 1 and 2, and SSL 360. So now we have our drums bouncing over there, and then our regular click. The majority of the controls here are exactly the same as your other channels. You still have your headphone and line out routing area, and then down here you still have your faders, your pans, all of that kind of thing. Having the separate playback returns is helpful if you want to send stem outs. So say you're mixing a live band, you want to send drums down 1 and 2, guitars down 3 and 4, keys down 5, 6, click down 7 and 8. And then for example, you have different band members on each headphone. You can use all of this to mix their own headphones based on those stems you're receiving from your DAW. If you click this direct right here, it's going to take your playback 1 and 2 and send it straight down to the interface output 1 and 2. It's just going to bypass all the routing and just 1 and 2 straight from your DAW right out of 1 and 2 of the interface. And same thing here, playback 3, 4 goes directly to 3, 4 of your interface, and then 5, 6 goes straight to headphone A, 7 and 8 goes straight to headphone B. So it bypasses all of the routing and then just straight through. So if you want simplicity, I would definitely check those. The next button over here on the right is Aux Masters. And this is where you can see basically those outputs. So if you're mixing a send over here, let's keep using this Analog 3, for example, where I have my mic plugged in. And if we have all these unmuted and decide to send, to headphone 1, now you can see it going out headphone 1. If you want to send headphone A. If you want to send to headphone B, right there. If you want to send just a little bit to one and a lot to another, you can see that right there. Same thing with your line 3 and 4. Check, check, check. It's just a way to set up routing. And then all of those channels have their own master. So, your headphone A and B, if it's just too loud overall or too quiet, you can adjust it there. But also for the headphones specifically, your interface has those knobs. So I recommend keeping those at unity unless you really just need to change something. This sends post button is going to make all the sends of that bus or that output post fader. So that means without it, I can, send to headphone A, pull down my mains, and it's still going to headphone A. If I change it to post, it's going to follow this main fader. So then as I pull it down, you lose send there. So post makes this just relative to your main fader. For most monitoring situations, I prefer not post, I prefer pre. So that would be that unchecked. If you want to forget all of your routing for a certain headphone setup or line out setup and just have it follow your main mix, basically follow this fader, you can click that here. And now this headphone A is just going to follow whatever the fader does. Regardless of this up here, that's completely irrelevant when you click that. Again, if you want it to be really simple, like everything goes everywhere, you can hit that follow mix 1 and 2. If you want to customize it, make sure you uncheck that. And same thing here, you have a solo and cut for each channel. You also have a mono, which is gonna ignore any pan information. So without the mono, we'll send some there. We can pan it, check, check, now it's all left, check, check, now it's all right. If you click mono, it's just gonna sum it, doesn't matter what your panning is doing. The only other thing to look at here is on line 3 and 4, you have the option to separate those out into separate outputs. So if you wanna just get a little more control for whatever reason, or maybe they're going to different areas, like you have a click and a talkback coming down line 4 from your DAW, that's where you would separate it. And then notice once you separate it, you actually get a separate volume for each one. So now you can send this just to line 3 or just to line 4, but you do lose your pan knob because then you're just dealing with 2 mono sends instead of a stereo one. All the way on the right over here, you have your master bus. This is the same thing as your monitor level, like your main 1 and 2 volume. So if you just need to make an overall tweak there. Going down from this view section, you have these user-defined buttons. And I looked, when I was looking to purchase this interface, I looked everywhere because they're like, you can assign the buttons. And I'm like, what can you assign it to? How do you assign them? Like, I couldn't find the answer to those questions anywhere. So if that's you, this section you're gonna wanna pay attention to. Basically, you have your 3 buttons here. You can click to engage them. By default, they are set up and labeled so that your red one cuts, just mutes your master. Your yellow one will toggle alternate speakers. So if you want your line 3 and 4 to power like some terrible speakers you have, for reference, you can do that. And then by default, green is talkback. So that'll engage the talkback. But if you right click on these, you can change it to whatever else you want. So you can have it dim, which is, lower your output by a certain amount. You can have it cut, you can have it sum to mono. So I actually like having this red one sum to mono. So whenever I'm mixing or working on something, I like to check it in mono, so I have a quick button there to do that. The next one I like to have on dim if I just want to quickly pull the volume down. And that corresponds to down here, there's this dim level. So I just have it pull down, I think it was -6. Not much, just a little bit. And then I have the bottom one set to talkback, but you can do all sorts of stuff again. You can invert the phase, sum to mono. There's also one that's pretty helpful. It's called 360 SSL 12 GUI. And what that means is it'll just call this window to your screen. So it'll basically toggle that whole screen. So I press it, it goes away, press it, it comes back. That's really helpful if you're working in a DAW and you just need to pop over and do a monitoring change. So that could be really good for like recording work. Set that up however you want. There's lots of options there. Down here in the control, you can set your sample rate. Usually the sample rate automatically sets to whatever Logic is at. So I wouldn't change that unless you need something specific or wanna force it. You can change your clock source to internal or to receive clock over ADAT. I like to keep it on internal and then tell ADAT to get the clock from the SSL. Loopback source. This is weird. This one got me. So loopback is kind of confusing, and unless you really need it for like advanced content creation stuff, I'd say don't worry about it, but I'll show you how to set it up either way. Loopback allows you to take a feed from your computer and send it back through your interface into your DAW. So for example, I'll just pull up Spotify and play my friend's song. So it's playing. You can see it coming in here on the master out, and it's coming through playback 1 and 2. Loopback, if we leave it set on playback 1 and 2, then we can go into Logic, create a new channel, and make sure it's muted before you do anything because it's going to cause a feedback loop if it's not muted. So go ahead and mute it, and then change it to stereo, and you want to go here. And loopback comes through on 7 and 8. So your 1, 2, 3, 4 are your interfaces, 5 and 6 is your talkback, and then loopback is 7 and 8. And then if you arm that, you'll now see that song coming through. So if you're doing whatever and just need to record an additional source, it's basically like plugging a cable into your headphone output of your computer and then routing it into 7 and 8 of your interface back into your DAW. So if you need to record a YouTube video or do some weird stuff with live streaming, that's how you can set that up. This little question mark is gonna tell you what everything does. So if you don't know what's going on, click that. The S is gonna clear any channels you have soloed. So if we have this soloed here, just click that to clear it. Settings here. This is where you can repurpose the headphone outputs to be additional line outputs. So if you come here You can change the sensitivity of your headphones. I leave it on standard. And then if you click line output mode, now headphone A is going to be line output 5 and 6. And now headphone B is going to be line output 7 and 8. And then you can change it to be unbalanced or balanced right there. The only other option in here is the peak hold time. So you can have, basically it's this little line right here. Check. So it holds for 3 seconds and then it falls. You can have no peak hold, so it's just the meters, or you can have hold until cleared. So that'll stay until you click to clear it. I like 3 seconds because I like to hang around a little bit, but not be there forever. So again, if you want to use this as like a live tracks device, then I would recommend changing these headphones over to line so you get your full thing. And then all you'd need is that TRS 1/4 inch to like 2 TS 1/4 inch to split that out and get more functionality. Or if you just do a balanced TRS to wherever you're going, if that has a stereo input, that'll work too. Down here, you have the same controls that you have assignable in your user section, but software keys. So if you didn't assign it in your user section, you can dim right here or cut, and you'll see, you know, if I click dim, then my button that is dimmed also lights up. So for alt speaker, if you're not using a second set of monitors, you don't need to worry about this. But if you specifically want, like you're using this as a mixing setup and you want a second set of monitors, you're gonna turn this on, and then 4 gets grayed out. It's now following the same thing as 1 and 2. And then you can click Alt to toggle between listening on your main 1 and 2 and your secondary 3 and 4. So if you want to set up your multiple monitor thing, that's how you do it. And then just make sure your mains are plugged into 1 and 2 and your secondaries are plugged into 3 and 4. And then you have an alt speaker trim right down here. So if you need them a little louder or a little quieter, whatever, you can make an adjustment there. If you want this to just completely be the simplest form that it can be, no advanced routing, everything just goes direct to something else, hit I/O mode, and then it's going to disable everything on the mixer, and it put these changes in place. So your analog inputs 1 through 4 is DAW input 1 through 4. Talkback goes to DAW 5 and 6. Loopback goes to DAW 7 and 8. ADAT goes to DAW 9 through 16. And then your outputs just go direct through. So your DAW playback 1 and 2 goes to out 1 and 2, and so forth and so forth. So that is basically, if you go through and zero everything out and you just want it to be super basic, you can click that. But generally, you know, I find it's helpful to configure exactly what I want. The last thing you can do here is save a profile. So I only have one currently for content, and so I'll pull that up and it'll be all the specific routing I need to get audio to OBS, to do screen capture for the videos and all of that. But if you save a new one here, so hit save as, and we'll just call it, we'll call it alt speaker because I have that set up currently. And just save it in the SSL 12 folder. And so now there's this alt speaker configuration where, you know, I've clicked alt speaker and I've set all that up. And so then you can just go back and load, and then I'll go back to content, and that flipped it back to my content mode. So if you need separate stuff, one for mixing, one for mobile recording, one for content creation, you can set up different profiles, different routing options, and quickly toggle back and forth. That's huge. I haven't seen that on any interfaces before, so that's definitely a huge plus for this. That's about all there is to cover in this software tutorial. Again, I love the layout of this. I love how the interface sounds. I can't recommend it enough if you're looking for kind of that mid-sized interface. If you have any questions about the SSL 12, be sure to check out that video I did. I'll link it again here, or just comment, let me know your questions. I'll be happy to help out. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe.